My brother called me a disgrace, then his fiancée greeted me as chairman at their wedding.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Clara Morgan opened the mailbox in front of her small rented apartment tucked deep within the Bedford neighborhood. It wasn't the worst place in New York, but no one would ever call it a desirable address either. A white envelope sat among the usual stack of car wash flyers, fast food coupons, and a water bill. Clara picked it up and immediately recognized the handwriting. It was unmistakably her mother's. She paused for a few seconds before opening it. Inside her stirred a strange emotion that wasn't quite nervousness, nor was it hope. It was just that familiar hollowness that always showed up whenever her family remembered her for some reason. When she opened the envelope, an intricately designed wedding invitation was revealed. Ivory background, gold lettering. David and Lucy. The wedding will take place on Saturday, June 3rd at Rosewood Estate. Kindly. Do not bring a +1. Dress simply. Avoid drawing attention. Clara frowned. That last line felt like a slap, gentle, but deliberate. Avoid drawing attention. Why would anyone write that in a wedding invitation? She turned the card over, and her heart gave a sharp jolt. A handwritten line in dark blue ink, slanted. Sit in the last row. David's fiancée doesn't want you in the wedding photos. The signature underneath belonged to her mother, Carol. Clara sat down on the small wooden chair by the kitchen table. She placed the card in front of her and stared at it as if it were a verdict. In a way, it was. Every word read like a sentence: you're not a joy. You shouldn't be seen. You're a flaw. Her phone buzzed with a message from Julia, her coworker at GreenTech. Clara, we have a Zoom meeting with the Seattle tech team today at 5 p.m. Clara replied briefly, okay. But her mind was spinning. This was her family. The same family for whom she had sold her first car, a beat-up vehicle she had worked hard to buy at 21 to help her parents pay her grandfather's hospital bills. The same family she emptied her savings for so David could earn his master's degree in Boston. The same family that, whenever there was a crisis, called her back like one of their own. And now, she was the one who must sit in the last row. She called her mother. No answer. So she texted. I received the wedding invitation. Do you really think I don't deserve to be present at David's wedding? 10 minutes later, her mother responded. Don't make a big deal out of this, Clara. We all know you don't quite fit into elegant settings. Just sit quietly and it'll be fine. Short. Cold. No greeting. No affection. Clara shut her phone, took a deep breath, and gave a dry laugh, not one of amusement or pain, just the kind that comes from fermented helplessness. Outside the window, a little boy was walking with his grandmother, chattering about school. Clara remembered when she was little and her mother would walk with her like that. Her mom once said, "You are the light of my life." And now? Another message appeared, this time from David. If it makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to come. Lucy can be a bit particular, as you know. Clara stared at the message. Every word felt like a gentle but lethal rejection. They didn't need her. Didn't want her. And they had no problem making that clear. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from Josephine Lewis, the head of the tech department at work. Clara, the energy control algorithm you submitted yesterday was excellent. The boss just called to say you'll be leading the presentation to Carrington Group next month. Clara typed back. Thank you. I'll prepare thoroughly. She stood up, poured a glass of water, and looked back at the invitation still lying on the table. She picked it up, began to tear the edge but stopped. Tearing was easy. Forgetting was not. And the pain would still remain. Just then, there was a knock at the door. It was Ethan, the elderly man from the apartment across the hall. He brought an empanada. Clara, today's the feast day of St. John. Would you like to share some pastry? Thank you, Mr. Ethan, but I'm not very hungry right now. He nodded. You look tired. Something bothering you? Clara shook her head and forced a smile. It's nothing. I just got a wedding invitation, but it felt more like a deportation notice. Ethan frowned. Family? She gave a small nod. The worst pain doesn't come from strangers looking down on you. It comes from your own family doing it, even after you've done everything for them. Ethan sighed. I was a teacher for 30 years. I've seen so many kids get dragged down by their own families just for being different from what they expected. But you know what? The ones they underestimated are often the ones who rise the highest. Clara smiled. I don't know where I'm rising to. Right now, it just feels like I've been kicked out of the nest. Ethan gently patted her shoulder. You're young, smart, and kind. Don't let a few poisonous words snuff out the light inside you. She nodded, and for the first time all day, her eyes misted over. After Ethan walked away, Clara returned to the table and looked again at the note. David's fiancée doesn't want you in the wedding photos. She whispered to herself. It's okay. You don't need to see me. But I'll still be there. The pre-wedding dinner was held at the Marquis Garden, an upscale restaurant near Central Park. White walls trimmed with turquoise, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, soft piano music falling like thin rain. Clara arrived on time. She wore a dark brown velvet dress, simple but elegant. No one came to greet her. No one noticed her. She walked in, and the servers glanced past her like she was a stranger who had wandered in by accident. A long oval table stood in the center of the room, surrounded by more than 10 people, her parents Raymond and Carol, David and his fiancée Lucy, and members of both families. Strangers, and they all looked at Clara like she was some object to identify. Who is that? Only one person nodded slightly, Elena, Clara's cousin. But she quickly looked away when Lucy's gaze swept over. Clara sat at the one empty seat, at the far end of the table. David stood up, raising a glass of red wine. His face glowed as if he were about to step into a higher, purer world. First, thank you all for being here. This is a special moment, when two families officially become one. He paused briefly, then turned to their parents. I want to thank my mom and dad for raising me and always believing in me. Applause followed. Clara stayed silent, fingers resting lightly on her water glass. David continued, his voice deeper now, almost solemn. On this occasion, I also want to share a decision. After careful consideration, Lucy and I have agreed, Clara will not attend the wedding on Saturday. The room went dead silent, like air had been sucked out. Clara froze. She looked up at David, stunned and chilled. He went on calmly, like he was discussing logistics. Nothing personal. But we all understand that a wedding represents the stature of two families. And sometimes, the wrong presents can make things less appropriate. Lucy gave a faint smile beside him, her hand resting gently on David's shoulder like a seal of approval. Before Clara could react, her mother Carol chimed in, tone casual. She should be grateful she still carries the Morgan name. If her father hadn't backed her as a kid, she'd probably be lining up for food stamps by now. Soft laughter rippled along the table from Lucy and a man in an expensive suit, Anthony, Lucy's uncle. He joked. Good thing she won't be in the wedding photos. If she showed up in the press pics, we'd probably have to hire someone to Photoshop her out. Clara clenched her hands under the table. Her chopsticks trembled slightly, but her face stayed composed, like she was hearing a story about someone else. Elena glanced at her, briefly sympathetic but then looked down, avoiding her. Clara spoke, voice calm and clear. If you didn't want me at the wedding, why send the invitation? David shrugged. You're still family. Sending an invite is the polite thing. But attending or not is the wise choice. Lucy jumped in, her voice sugary sweet and fake. No one wants division, Clara. But you have to understand, some atmospheres just don't fit everyone. Her father Raymond nodded. I don't want you to feel excluded. But daughter, sometimes staying silent is how you preserve what dignity you have left. Clara looked at every face around the table. No one stood by her. Not one defended her. Not a single empathetic glance. She gave a dry laugh. So my presence is an embarrassment? No one answered. Only the sound of cutlery and a server refilling Lucy's wine glass. Clara turned to her mother. You once said I was your pride and joy, remember? The year I got into UPM, you took me to celebrate in Times Square. Carol didn't look at her. She just sipped her wine and said. Back then, I didn't realize what kind of person you'd become. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. She stood up, eyes scanning the table. I get it now. Thanks for reminding me where I stand. No one stopped her. Not a hand. Not a word. She walked out of the banquet room as if stepping out of a deep, invisible wound. Outside, night had fallen. Yellow lights draped the cobblestone path, but to Clara, everything felt like a thick, suffocating fog. Just then, a soft voice called behind her. Clara. It was Elena. She ran up, holding out a small handkerchief. Are you okay? Clara took the handkerchief and nodded. Thank you. You don't have to take my side. They'll say you betrayed them. Elena pressed her lips together. I don't care. I know you're not who they say you are. You were the only one in the family who helped me apply for a scholarship last year. No one remembers, but I do. Clara looked at her cousin, her gaze softening. Hold on to your kindness, Elena. Don't let them trample it. Elena nodded. The two parted ways in front of the restaurant. Clara continued walking, her heart heavy. On the subway, she sat among strangers, still clutching the white handkerchief. Inside, a phrase played over and over in her mind. I'm not welcome. I'm a burden. I'm a parasite. Those she once loved now treated her like an unwanted detail, like moss growing on a white wall. The Morgan family's house was in the Upper East Side, a wealthy neighborhood of New York. Clara stood in front of the black iron gate, holding an old key in her hand, her heart sinking as if she were about to enter a museum that had forgotten her name. When the lock clicked open, she pushed the gate. The scent of lavender from the small front garden was still the same, but everything else felt unfamiliar. The front door was slightly ajar. She stepped inside, weighed down by emotion. Who is it? Her mother's voice called from the kitchen. It's me, Clara replied. Carol poked her head out, her face expressionless. Why didn't you call first? I thought home was a place you could come back to any time. Her mother stared at her for a few seconds, then turned back into the kitchen. Clara walked toward the staircase, her steps heavy. When she reached her old bedroom door, she stopped short. A small sign hung from the doorknob. Room for rent, $450 per month. Contact Mrs. Carroll. She opened the door. The room now held only a plain single bed, a cheap IKEA wardrobe, and the sharp scent of chemical air freshener. She turned around and looked under the stairs. Two taped cardboard boxes sat there, marked, Clara's stuff. She pulled one out and opened it. Inside were what was left, a few old engineering books, the winter sweater she used to wear in college, and a crumpled envelope. Clara pulled it out. It was a handwritten letter, in her own handwriting from when she was 19. The envelope was sealed, labeled. To Mom, on my first night shift. The seal was still intact. It had never been opened. She sat down on the floor, the light slipping through the doorway highlighting the thin layer of dust on the ground. Clara opened the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. The ink had faded, but the words appeared. Mom, tonight I start my night shift at the cafe. The pay isn't great, but it's enough to cover my tuition and help out a little. I know you don't want me to overwork myself, but I want you to be proud of me. I'll try my best, just please don't forget why I'm trying. Clara folded it back up, her eyes red. Her mother had never opened it. Maybe she never wanted to know what Clara was doing. The sound of dishes clattering came from the kitchen. Clara stood up, took the envelope with her, and went downstairs. In the kitchen, her mother was stir-frying vegetables. Clara spoke. "You're renting out my room. An empty room is a waste. I already packed your things there under the stairs. And the letter I wrote you, you never read it." Carol didn't turn around. "I didn't have time to read that kind of thing." "You're being dramatic again." Clara placed the letter on the table. "I wrote it when I started working night shifts at 19. Not for praise, just so you'd know I wasn't lazy. I just wanted you to understand." "Understand what?" she interrupted, turning to Clara. "That you're the daughter who doesn't fit in with this family. Who didn't get an MBA abroad like David. Who didn't marry into money like my friend's daughter. That every time there's a family gathering, you're the one who feels out of place." Clara paused. Each word hit like a blade. She asked in a low voice. "Were you ever proud of me?" Carol looked at her for a few seconds, then let out a cold laugh. "I'm proud of a daughter who knows her place. But sadly, you don't." Silence fell over the room. Clara slowly sat down, staring at nothing. "I'm not trying to ruin the wedding. I just wanted to be treated like part of the family. Just once. If you really thought that, you wouldn't make yourself so different. You live quietly, independently, no one can control you. This family doesn't know where to place you in the picture. No one needs to place me. I can stand on my own. And because you insist on standing alone, you can't blend in." A deep voice interrupted from behind. "What's going on?" Her father, Raymond, had just come home. "Clara's bringing up old stories again," her mother replied. Raymond took off his coat and hung it up. "Clara, it's best if you don't come to the wedding. I don't want relatives asking, 'Who's that girl?'" Clara stood, her eyes moving between her parents. "I'm the one who sold her car to help pay Grandpa's hospital bills. The one who drove David to the airport when he left for school in England. The one who stayed late every night finishing a project so the company could land its first contract." No one responded. Raymond picked up the newspaper and sat on the couch, as if the conversation had been about someone else's life. Clara walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "I get it now. This house is no longer my home." No one stopped her. Not a word. She stepped through the gate. A cold wind tugged at her thin coat. Her heart felt like an empty room, no voices, no warmth, only one thing remained, clarity. This was no longer home. It was just a place that used to hold memories. She turned and walked away. Each step echoed in her mind like a door closing slowly. The next day at noon, Clara sat in a small cafe in Queens, her laptop open in front of her, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of ginger tea. She couldn't focus on her work. The energy analysis report for GreenTech sat half-written, her unfinished lines of code suddenly meaningless. She opened a new browser tab and typed in the search bar. Rosewood Estate Event June 3rd guest list. Nothing concrete came up. But after a few clicks, she found a link to Rosewood Estate's internal site that required an access code to check invitation info. Clara entered the code printed on her invitation, VDP 360 DL0306. The interface shifted to the seating chart. She typed her name into the search box, Clara Morgan. No results. She tried again, Clara. 3 names appeared. Clara Green, friend of the bride. Clara Anderson, financial partner of Lucy's family. Clara Sanders, hotel receptionist for guest accommodations. She tried once more, this time with just Morgan. Still nothing. Clara sat frozen for a moment. Her heart didn't race, it slowed, as if someone had pressed mute on her emotions. She picked up her phone and called the reception number listed on the site. Rosewood Estate, how can I help you? Hi. I'd like to confirm my seat for the wedding on June 3rd. My name is Clara Morgan. Clara Morgan, the receptionist hesitated. Sorry, are you a guest or part of the event staff? We have 3 Claras working that day. Clara paused. She straightened, her tone firmer. I'm the groom's sister. Ah. I'm sorry, but there is no Clara Morgan listed as a guest on the official registry. She hung up. The words kept echoing in her mind, no name. The tea had gone cold. She closed her laptop and slipped it into her bag. On her way home, she passed through Lincoln Center Plaza, where street musicians played flamenco guitar. The rhythm was lively, but inside Clara there was only a cold void. People walked by, sunlight catching in their hair, but Clara felt like a fading shadow that didn't exist. When she got home, she opened her closet and took out a simple black blazer she usually wore for major meetings. She carefully ironed it, hung it neatly on a hook. She opened her shoe cabinet and chose a plain black pair, slightly scuffed but clean. Her phone buzzed with a message from Julia, her coworker. Clara, the Carrington Group is sending reps tomorrow. Need help preparing? She replied, no need. Thanks. Then she opened her notes app and typed a line. I'll go. Not to intrude. But to see just how far their contempt goes. She put the phone down and rested her head in her hand. The following afternoon, Clara stopped by a small shop owned by Luna, her old college friend, the only one who hadn't abandoned her when she was suspended for being behind on tuition. Luna's shop sold handmade ceramics and leather goods. She was wiping enamel mugs when she saw Clara walk in. Clara. You look like you just argued with the whole world. Worse. Family again? Clara nodded. I'm not on the guest list. But I still plan to go. Luna stopped wiping. Go. You think they'll leave you alone? I'm not going to do anything. I just want to watch from a distance. To remind myself, this is the final limit. After that, I'm not coming back. Luna was silent for a moment, then handed Clara a teal silk scarf. Even if you're standing alone, you should look beautiful. Not for them, for you. Clara smiled faintly. Thank you. You're the only one who still sees me as a person. I can't forget the Clara who took me to the hospital when I fainted in the library, even though you had a midterm that day. I owe you more than a silk scarf. They hugged briefly. Then Clara walked out, carrying with her the only thing that still belonged to kindness, friendship. The night before the wedding. Clara sat by her window, looking at the city lights. She whispered. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want them to know I was there too. Her phone rang. It was Alex, a coworker from Green Tech. He was the lead engineer, and the only one who knew a bit about her family. Clara, are you okay? Why do you ask? You haven't logged on to the company network all day. And, isn't tomorrow your brother's wedding? Clara let out a light laugh. Yes. But I'm a guest without a name. A shadow. Alex was silent for a few seconds, then said. If you go, then go with dignity. You don't need an invitation. But let them see that you did not fall. Clara whispered. I'm not even sure I have any dignity left. Then go to find it again. Early morning. Clara set her alarm for 7 a.m. She knew no one would come to pick her up, and no one would be waiting. But that no longer mattered. She just wanted to do one last thing for herself. Clara arrived at Rosewood Estate at 9 a.m. The ground spanned nearly 3 hectares, shaded by old pine trees and perfectly trimmed lawns. From the main gate, a stone path led to the grand hall, where classical music echoed from hidden speakers behind the fern-covered fences. She wore the old black blazer she had ironed the night before. Her hair was neatly tied in a low bun, no makeup, no perfume. Just a small, dark brown leather bag slung over her shoulder, bought during a clearance sale last year. No one greeted her. The receptionist glanced at her, then quietly spoke into a headset, but didn't stop her. Clara walked in silently, her low heels making no sound against the polished stone floor. She didn't head into the main hall, where guests were mingling and sipping wine. Instead, she turned down a side path leading to the staff and logistics prep area. There, a row of plastic chairs sat near a temporary restroom, backs resting against a faded cream wall bleached by the sun. Clara chose the seat in the far corner. In front of her stretched a vast lawn leading to the wedding stage, where a floral arch covered in white orchids stood. A few young staffers passed by, glancing at her and whispering. "Is she a guest?" "Don't know. Maybe an admin who wandered in." "She's not in uniform. But doesn't really look like a proper guest either." Clara lowered her head, fingers tightening around her bag strap. She didn't react. She was used to those questioning eyes. After more than an hour and a half of waiting, the music shifted from violin to a soft piano melody. The crowd began making their way to the lawn. Chairs were arranged in 4 long rows, divided into 2 sides, all facing the stage. Clara didn't move. She remained seated, completely apart. No one looked her way, no one noticed the small figure sitting under the tree near the restrooms. The ceremony began. The MC held a microphone and spoke. "Today is a special day, as 2 wonderful people, David Morgan and Lucy Carrington, officially join their lives together. Let's welcome the groom." David stepped out in an elegant black tuxedo, holding a bouquet of white flowers, his face radiant. Applause erupted. Clara didn't move. A shaft of sunlight glinted off her sunglasses, not worn to block the sun, but to hide the redness in her eyes. David took the mic. His voice carried through the estate. "Before we welcome the bride, I'd like to share a few words. The Morgan family has weathered many storms. But today, as I look out at all of you, one thing is clear: we've moved past our messy past, and we're stepping into an entirely new chapter." He paused for a few seconds. Clara felt her chest tighten. "My family today is clean, elegant, no longer weighed down by the shame of our past." That sentence landed like a cold blade. No one in the crowd reacted, but Clara knew exactly who David's eyes had just swept across. Her. Not her name. Not a direct look. Just a passing glance, sharp enough to leave a cut. Lucy walked out after that, in an ivory wedding gown with a veil nearly 3 meters long, her gaze regal. She smiled as she walked toward the stage, arm in arm with her father. Everyone watched, clapped, joyful. In the last row, Clara sat frozen. Whispers came from a group of backstage staff nearby. "I heard the groom's sister wasn't officially invited." "Really? Why?" "Keep it down. I heard she caused trouble before, got kicked out of college or something." Clara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She opened her bag, pulled out a small water bottle, and took a sip. Her hand still trembled. A laugh rang out up front. Her mother, Carol, was chatting with Lucy's mother. Her face was glowing, showing no trace of the woman who had once told her daughter, "Don't embarrass the family." Clara thought back to the last time her mother hugged her, probably over 6 years ago. Since the day Clara stopped asking for money to finish school. Since the day she rented her own place, worked side jobs, lived like a ghost. And now, the ghost wasn't just a feeling, it was reality. She was sitting here, in a ceremony she should have been part of, yet no one acknowledged her existence. Music rose again. David and Lucy exchanged rings. A gentle kiss. Applause burst across the lawn. Clara stood up. No one noticed. She walked around the row of trees, heading toward the small path behind the stage that led to the parking lot. No one blessed her. No one embraced her. No one smiled. On the way out, she stopped in front of a wall covered in flowers. A handwritten sign hung there. For official guests only, please do not take photos without permission. She stared at the words. She thought, then what am I? A typo on the invitation? An extra chair no one wants to claim. She pulled out her phone, opened the camera, and recorded a slow pan of the estate from afar. Not to post. Not to share. Just to document. To document the moment she was erased from her own bloodline. As Clara reached the gate, a security guard stood there, surprised. "Miss, are you at the wedding party?" She nodded, offered a faint smile. "No. I'm just a shadow that wandered into someone else's memory." The guard looked puzzled, but didn't ask further. Clara stepped outside. The sky was still blue, the sun still shining. But for her, today was a funeral not for anyone else, but for the last shred of belief that family ties could save her. Clara returned to the venue after rinsing her face in the rear restroom. The cold water hadn't calmed the burning in her chest, but at least it helped her steady herself. She knew she wasn't ready to leave, not because she hoped to be noticed, but because she needed to witness the full extent of what they thought of her. The wedding shifted to a garden reception. Cocktail tables were scattered across the lawn, champagne sparkling in flutes, canopy platters passed around by servers in black and white uniforms. Clara stood silently in a far corner, behind a hibiscus bush, far enough to see everything without being seen. A group of young guests stood nearby, 3 men and 2 women, all in designer outfits, hair perfectly styled, voices laced with the arrogance of people well-educated but lacking empathy. She heard every word. "Hey, do you guys know who that girl with the brown hair behind the toilets is?" one of them asked. "No idea. Maybe a janitor or something." "No, that's Clara Morgan." "Clara? David's sister?" "Yeah. I heard she got kicked out of college for not paying tuition. Her parents didn't support her, and she wasn't exactly brilliant either." "Yikes. The groom's sister is that broke? Doesn't even look educated. She's dressed like she's at a funeral." The group giggled. Clara stayed still. Her hand clenched the strap of her bag, her nails digging into the worn leather so hard it felt like it might rip. But her face didn't change. Only her eyes grew harder, glinting like cold glass. A woman's voice rang out, not from the group, but from a middle-aged woman in a navy blue dress standing with 2 older men. "My daughter-in-law told me that girl once emailed asking to intern for free at her company. But they turned her down, lack of experience, not brand appropriate." "That interior design firm, right?" one of the men asked. "Yeah, Carrington Design." Lucy said it was exhausting just hearing her name. "Like, poor but thinks she's important." Strange though. The Morgans aren't even that poor. How did she turn out like that? Probably her mother's genes. They laughed and poured more wine. Clara felt every word like acid on her skin. No one saw her. No one knew she had heard everything. But she knew them and she wouldn't forget. A young server named Martin passed by, slowing for a moment. He seemed to realize Clara wasn't staff, but also not an official guest. "Miss, is there anything I can help you with?" Clara shook her head, smiling slightly. "No need. I just want to look around." Martin looked at her a moment longer, then nodded and walked away. A minute later, Clara stepped out from behind the bushes. She followed the line of trees, moving closer to the crowd, but still keeping her distance. At a table near the stage, a group of high-profile guests were deep in conversation. Among them was Edward Monroe, a senior partner at a major energy firm, and Isabel Carrington, Lucy's mother. Clara paused behind the shade of a tree and stood still. "I heard Greentech is about to present their full energy transition proposal to Carrington Group." Edward asked. Yes, that's right, Isabel replied, her tone calculating. Lucy chose them because their response was quick, and the lead engineer seems to really understand the technology. What's her name again? Can't recall exactly, just remember it's a young woman, very American sounding. Clara something. But surely no relation to the Morgans. She laughed. Clara narrowed her eyes. A strange feeling rose in her chest, part bitterness, part irony, part sorrow. They didn't know. They were talking about her. The one dismissed, mocked, erased from the guest list, was the same person they were counting on to rescue their company. They had no idea the woman they scorned held the key to the very technology they were relying on. She sat down on a wooden bench near the stone path, head bowed. Her eyes were red not from sadness, but from rage. An elderly couple passed by. The woman glanced at her and offered a gentle smile. Are you part of the family? Clara looked up and answered softly. Used to be. The man nodded. Don't be sad. Those who are forgotten usually have the best memory. They moved on, leaving Clara with herself. She sighed. A breeze stirred her coat, carrying with it the scent of expensive perfume from the reception tables. Guests raised glasses, exchanged sweet titles of endearment where the name, Clara, only lived in whispers of mockery. She remembered the first time she built an Arduino circuit at 20. Stayed up all night, burned 2 IC chips because of a wrong resistor, but didn't quit. That was the first time she thought, I may not be pretty or rich, but I'll make people listen with my mind. She sat there 10 more minutes. No one asked. No one called. No one remembered. And that would make her remember forever. Clara stood. Sunlight angled through the trees, casting a soft glow on the edge of her black blazer. She adjusted her collar and walked toward the gate. There was one final act left. The wedding ended around 5 p.m. Guests began to leave Rosewood Estate one by one. Some laughed and posed for pictures, others waved down taxis, some squeezed in final congratulations to the couple. Clara still stood there, alone on the gravel path, clutching her bag, eyes tracking the crowd. The wind was cooling now. Clouds were gathering in the west. A few red leaves drifted across the lawn, rolling slowly like time teasing her. She knew she should leave. Everything was clear. No one called her name. No one needed her. But something kept her rooted in place. Then she saw Carol. Her mother was walking from the main area toward the gate. She wore a beige coat, her hair in a high bun, walking tall like a woman of influence. Beside her were several older guests, Benjamin, an old friend of her father, and Teresa Monroe, a familiar name in New York's high society. They chatted enthusiastically. Carol laughed aloud. Thank goodness everything went smoothly. As long as you prepare carefully, there's nothing to worry about. Her eyes swept the area, landing intentionally or not for a few seconds on Clara. But her face didn't change. Clara stepped out from the trees and called softly. Mom. Carol hesitated briefly. The people with her also paused. The air tightened, like a rope stretched between two strangers. Clara approached, stopping 3 steps away. Up close, Carol still looked elegant, a cold beauty shaped by diplomatic receptions and elite etiquette classes. Clara spoke in a low voice. Do you have a few minutes? Carol didn't turn fully. Her eyes remained forward. You saw it, didn't you? This is a world you don't belong to. Clara swallowed hard. Not out of shock but habit. Because I'm not rich? Not famous? Or not polished enough for you? Because you don't know how not to make others uncomfortable. Clara tilted her head, half smiling. I kept quiet. Sat far away. Didn't interrupt. Still made you uncomfortable. You're a misplaced highlight in a perfect painting. Even when you stand still, people notice. Clara was silent for a moment, then asked, as if she'd rehearsed it. Were you ever proud of me? Silence. Only the clicking of someone's heels echoing behind her. Carol didn't answer right away. She lifted her hand to adjust her collar and finally said, "I was proud of the child who knew her place." A cold pause. "But sadly, you never did." Clara closed her eyes. That wasn't the first wound, but it was the final blow. Precise. Brutal. Years of effort. Sleepless nights. Swallowed tears. All crushed by a single sentence. Carol turned and walked away. No glance back. No parting words. Clara stood, frozen. Around her, the rustle of pine trees, the scrape of luggage wheels on gravel, someone calling for a taxi. In her mind, just one echo remained. I was proud of the child who knew her place. But sadly, you never did. She sat on a nearby bench and exhaled slowly. Her gaze drifted to the empty chairs, where the party had just ended. A soft voice spoke up. It was Martin, the young staffer from before. He held out a coat. "You left this near the parking lot." Clara accepted it, nodding faintly. "Thank you, Martin." He blinked. "You know my name. I always remember the names of those who treated me like a human being." Martin smiled gently. "I saw you standing alone the whole time. I don't know what's going on, but I hope you have a peaceful day." She nodded, softly. "I will. Not today. But soon." He left. Clara slipped on the coat. Her eyes landed on a sign staked in the grass nearby. "Thank you for being part of our special day." She let out a small, bitter laugh. A part of their special day? What part? The hidden part? The cut-out part? The part no one acknowledged? She stood. Her old black shoes were slightly muddy, but she didn't care. She walked to the gate, past the final few guests waiting for rides. No one said goodbye. No one saw her off. Before stepping into the taxi, she looked back one last time. From a distance, she saw David laughing with his friends. Her mother chatting with socialites. Lucy posing for selfies with guests. No one looked her way. But she had seen enough. She got in. The door shut. The driver asked, "Where to, miss?" Clara answered, "Anywhere. As long as it's not here." The car rolled forward. In the rearview mirror, Clara saw her own faint reflection, lonely, but whole. For the first time, she realized, being cast out didn't destroy her. It marked the beginning of freedom. She leaned her head against the window and whispered to herself, "It's done." That evening, in the grand hall of Rosewood Estate, guests began gathering for the formal dinner, the most important part of the wedding celebration. The air shimmered with the golden glow of crystal chandeliers. A soft jazz band played from the corner. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter flowed with familiar toasts. Lucy, now changed into a dazzling silver gown, held a glass of champagne and walked up to the main stage with David, to thunderous applause. Clara stood against the far wall, near a white marble pillar. She had washed her face, let her hair down, and put her black coat back on. She hadn't planned to stay, but something inside her, maybe pride, maybe the final sliver of belief, kept her there. Lucy raised her hand for silence, then smiled at her groom. "David, do you know what I love most about you?" David looked at her, holding her hand. "Because I'm always there when you need me." Lucy shook her head gently. "No. What I love most is that you trust me to do what's right when it matters." She turned to face the audience, her eyes resting briefly on some of the older members of the family. "And I need to do what's right now." The entire hall fell silent. Lucy walked to the center of the stage, raised the microphone, and looked straight into the audience. I know today is our happiest day. But there's also someone sitting quietly, unwelcomed, unacknowledged. Yet, if not for that person, neither I nor my family might be sitting here right now. The hall murmured. David looked at Lucy, his brows furrowed. Lucy continued. 1 month ago, my family's company, Carrington Group, faced the brink of bankruptcy due to an energy crisis. No one could save us except for one company called Greentech. Some faces in the audience began to turn toward each other. Lucy's voice rang out, firm. The one who signed the agreement to provide us with the technology, who changed the entire way our company operates, is a woman. An engineer with no powerful surname, no foreign degree. But with more intellect and determination than anyone I've ever met. She paused, her eyes fixed on the back of the room. That person is here today. And that person is Clara Morgan. A hush swept through the room. All eyes immediately turned. Clara stood still. A few people began whispering and murmuring. Is that Clara? David's sister? Clara? She's the CEO of Greentech. Lucy stepped down from the stage, walking straight toward Clara. David stood frozen, his face pale. Mrs. Carroll clutched the armrest tightly, her eyes full of turmoil. Lucy stopped in front of Clara, her voice trembling but clear. I'm sorry, that today, I let you stand in the darkest corner. Clara looked at Lucy and replied softly. I wasn't waiting for an apology. But you deserve more than one. Lucy bowed her head. In the luxurious wedding hall, the bride bowed before the woman labeled the blemish of the celebration. You're not just a guest, you're the one who saved my family. And I congratulate David, for having a sister he may never catch up to in this lifetime. Applause broke out. One, then two, then the entire hall clapped. Clara still said nothing. But her eyes shimmered. Lucy returned to the stage. I'd like to invite the CEO of Greentech, Clara Morgan, to join me here. Clara hesitated before stepping up. The condescending stares from earlier had transformed into astonishment, respect, and shame. A man in a blue suit, Edward Monroe, whispered. That's her. The girl I heard mentioned in the Carrington Group meeting. Lucy's mother, Mrs. Isabel, covered her mouth with a forced smile. David stood silently, his eyes wavering. Clara took the microphone. Her voice was deep and steady, like current through a closed circuit. I didn't come here to be applauded. I came to witness how far human contempt can go. The hall fell silent. I'm Clara. The sister who was left off the guest list. The one not suitable to appear in the wedding photos. The shadow seated near the restroom. And also the person who just signed a 10-year clean energy contract with Carrington Group. She paused and turned to David. You once said, our family is now clean, elegant, no more shame. You were right. Because the real shame is how people treat their own blood. Lucy was still, her lips tightly pressed. A few female guests were in tears. Clara bowed slightly. I thanked the bride for the rare courage she showed on what was supposed to be a perfect day. And I'll be leaving right after this moment, not because I don't belong, but because I no longer need to prove that to anyone. She handed the mic back to Lucy and walked off the stage. Thunderous applause erupted. Not because she was a guest of honor, but because she stood tall in a world that tried to force her to bow. Mrs. Carroll whispered to David. How can it be her? How can it be? David stood dazed, gripping his wine glass like he wanted to crush it. Clara walked through the crowd as people clapped. Those who once brushed past her like a shadow now called out her name. Clara. May I get a picture with you? Excuse me, are you the one behind the Greentech solution? I'm a former Carrington associate, what an honor. Clara only offered a faint smile and didn't stop. At the door, Lucy called out. Clara. I hope it's not too late to say, I admire you. Clara turned and replied with a nod and eyes no longer filled with pain. She knew, from this moment on, her name was no longer something to hide but something people would be forced to remember. After leaving the stage, Clara walked down the long hallway leading to the main gate of Rosewood Estate. Her steps were light and firm. For the first time in years, she didn't feel cold under the luxurious golden lights. She didn't feel small among extravagant laughter. A woman approached Mrs. Isabel Carrington, Lucy's mother. Her face was tense, lips tight, but her eyes no longer bore arrogance. "Miss Clara, I want to thank you for what you've done for my family." Clara stopped, nodding politely. "I didn't do it for your family. I did it out of responsibility to Greentech. Whatever the reason, we still owe you an apology. For the disregard. And for the silence." Clara replied softly, without anger or forgiveness. "You're not the only one who stayed silent. But at least, you're the first to admit it." Mrs. Isabel nodded and stepped back. Clara kept walking. She had just reached the grand foyer when her parents, Raymond and Carol, appeared from the opposite corridor. It was as if they had been waiting for her. Mrs. Carroll looked up at her daughter. Her gaze wasn't sharp anymore. But it wasn't tender either. It was the look of someone realizing she'd been facing the wrong way her whole life. "Clara." Clara stopped. The wind from the garden swept in through the open door, gently stirring her coat. "I don't need an apology," she said. Raymond spoke, his voice hoarse. "I never thought it would come to this. When you called her Mom in front of everyone, I felt ashamed." Clara looked at her father. The man who once stood tall in her childhood was now slouched, his gaze lost. "Not ashamed because you stood up, but because I didn't stand by you when you needed me," he murmured. Mrs. Carroll was silent for a while, then said, "You've forgiven all of them. But what about me?" Clara looked straight into her mother's eyes. "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. But because I don't want my heart to rot any further." Mrs. Carroll froze. Her lips pressed tight. But for the first time, tears welled up in her eyes. Clara bowed her head slightly. "From today on, I no longer stand in a place where I can be looked down on. If anyone wants to speak to me, they'll have to look up." Then she turned and walked away. Behind her, Mrs. Carroll uttered her name, not loud enough to call, but real enough to hold. "Clara." Clara didn't stop. She walked past them, not to leave but to rise above. Out in the courtyard, a group of guests waited for their cars. Among them was Mr. Edward Monroe, who just the day before had dismissed Clara as a friend of a friend. He approached and shook her hand. "I'm Edward, on the board at ExxonMobil. Today, my eyes were opened. Because of Greentech. Because of the person behind it. If you're willing, I'd like to invite you to be the keynote speaker at next month's National Energy Conference." Clara nodded. "I'll consider it. Thank you." A young woman ran up, Elena, her cousin. Her eyes sparkled. "Clara. I told you. You're not the trash people said you were. You're the real light." Clara hugged Elena tightly. "Thank you. It's because of you I remembered I was never truly alone." Elena slipped a printed photo into Clara's hand, a candid shot from the stage, Lucy bowing before her. "I took this so I can tell my kids someday that Clara was the person I was proudest of." Clara smiled and tucked the photo into her purse. A salt-and-pepper-haired man approached Benjamin, her father's friend, who had once mocked her at the dinner table. "Miss Clara. I'm sorry. I said things I shouldn't have." Clara calmly replied. "I don't need people to remember who I am. I only need them to remember how they treated me." He nodded and stepped back, his eyes unsure. A car horn sounded. A white taxi pulled up at the gate. Lucy appeared, still in her evening gown, running toward her. "You're leaving already?" "Yes. I think your wedding was most beautiful the moment you stood up for justice. Lucy bowed her head. If I could go back, I wouldn't let you sit behind the toilet. Clara chuckled softly. It's all right. Thanks to that toilet, I realized I've outgrown the place they tried to trap me in. Lucy held her hand. You're my inspiration. Not because you're brilliant, but because when the world turned its back, you kept walking. Clara looked deeply into Lucy's eyes. And you were the first to open a door that was shut. That takes courage. Lucy nodded. They embraced tightly. Clara stepped into the car. When the driver asked, "Where to?" she replied, "Take me to Green Tech headquarters." Inside the car, Clara opened her phone. A message from Alex popped up. You did it. Everyone at the office just watched the live stream. They want to throw a party. Clara typed back. Tell them to hold off. We've got work tomorrow. She looked into the rearview mirror. For the first time, the reflection wasn't a silent shadow. It was a woman rising from the depths with her head held high. Though rejected by her own family, stripped of dignity and status, Clara Morgan never wavered. She worked relentlessly, never letting pain defeat her. This story proves, validation doesn't come from others, it comes from living with integrity and strength. Those who look down on others will eventually face the truth. False pride never prevails over genuine resilience and decency.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.